Salam, everybody, again. Welcome to this edition, a continuation of our Holy Week journey through the Passion of Jesus Christ. And as we continue with this journey, I would like to invite you today as we are going to look at two sub themes of the cleansing of the temple and that of the fig tree, and probably one more if time allows us. And so, when Jesus made his great entry, or the entry of victory to Jerusalem, he started now witnessing God in Jerusalem, and he continued his ministry. Like I said, to many of us, this was the climax. And so he avoided the political aspect and he goes on to the temple. Remember, the temple was the parliament, it was the state house, and it was the headquarter of the religious center. It was the treasury. All the ministries were there, and all the political parties, as we know, and all the professionals were in the temple. And like I said, the temple, according to the Jewish religious belief, was the salvation of mankind. And so when Jesus wept, he saw that this salvation of mankind will not be there. And so he tries to tell people of where the salvation of mankind is. Like today, brothers and sisters from the Islamic faith are in their holy month of Ramadan, and I want to wish them a Ramadan Karim. And so, for them, if you've never been to Mecca, you have not completed your religious journey, which is actually an expensive venture, like the way Christians today visit Jerusalem. But that pilgrimage to Jerusalem is no longer part of your salvation requirement. But among our brothers and sisters from the Islamic faith, that is part of their religious journey. And so, among the ancient Near East, they really have that centrality of religious journey completion, or religious faith completion, from where the faith actually came from. Now, when Jesus comes to the temple, he reproaches it. But now, whatever he did, he could not do in the Jewish court. He does this in the Gentile court. And in the Gentile court, because it was the court of the rest of the world, it was bigger. It was in the outer area of the temple, so it was bigger. So there was a market, there was a bank, or rather, people who were doing banking. There were forex exchange and all these financial institutions. There were markets and so on and so forth. And so he after weeping over Jerusalem, as we were told, he then moves to clean the city. And he could only do this after judging it. Him being the judge of judges, he judges the city and he doesn't see it as a place of salvation. That is one. And you can find this in Malachi 3, because this is where the temple is well described and its function are well articulated. The temple had become a center of money minting, and so it neglected the widows, the orphans, and the poor. And the monies that were collected in the temple were only benefited the politicians, like it is the case today. A shocking thing that I may throw in about Kenya is the realization that Kenya Airways, which is our national bird, only has very few planes. The rest of the planes belongs to the big, rich families of Kenya. And so when KQ is being bailed by government is actually bailing fellow politicians who make up that government. It is a very sorry state. It's just like the sugar industry. Politicians have infiltrated it. The bailout that are given to these sugar companies go to the rich of the rich. And so the temple had reached at that point, and that's why Jesus is judging it. And so he overturns the table of the forex exchange guys. He goes back, he throws away the money, he looks at the objects of sacrifice, he releases the birds, and he calls the chief priests thieves. Okay, they are stealing in the name of God. And so Israel is not where God wanted it to be. If you read Isaiah chapter 2 and Zechariah chapter 3, this is not where God wanted it to be. Like I said, Jesus was very synonymous with the extra Isaiah books. That is Isaiah 2 and 3. So if you read Isaiah 3 in chapter 56, already the temple had been judged long before. And I'm talking about when Isaiah wrote was like 700 years before Jesus. All right? And so already the temple was moving in a wrong direction. So when the Babylonians came and destroyed the temple, it really deserved to be destroyed. I'm not saying they did a good thing. I know people died and stuff, but it deserved to be destroyed because it had stopped serving the purpose of God. And so Isaiah 56 is also consistent with Jeremiah 7. Jeremiah wrote that later, probably Isaiah, the third Isaiah and Jeremiah were written almost the same time, because like I said, the extra Isaiah 2 books, Isaiah 2 and 3, were written by students of Isaiah long after he had passed on. And so Jeremiah, having lived, being a contemporary of Isaiah, lived 650 to 600 years before Jesus, is a much later saint than Isaiah chronologically. And so this is also where Christ quotes that it is not written. It is not written in the scriptures. Or rather, it is written in the scriptures. So whatever is not written and whatever is written was very clear to Jesus. And it was very clear that the temple was negating all this. And probably, if you remember, we looked at the temple and how laws were bent for people during swearing. It was written outrightly that you should not mention the name of God in vain. But the high priest and the Pharisees and Sadducees and the scribes could actually forgive you for swearing and not fulfilling your swearing if you did not swear by any element of sacrifice or in the altar. You never mentioned anything. And so you can see the kind of corruption that is there. Of course, like in most nations, developing nations, where the judiciary is supposed to come through, and it doesn't serve justice to the poor. And so if you have money, you can be forgiven. And so this is where the state of the temple had reached. And you see, when Jesus was demolishing all these markets and telling them the reality that the temple was supposed to be the house of prayer for all nations, he is not stopped by the Roman soldiers and the temple guards. All right? They probably think, like I said earlier, about the patriotism. They probably think these are patriotic Jews who is expressing his anger with the system. And so this is what it means for sure. And that's why when you go back, you will look at the Gospel of Luke. It really talks about Jesus healing people in the temple, especially Matthew. Jesus heals people in the temple. And so, and this was an imaginable thing. You cannot do those rituals in the temple. And it became a very, very controversial thing, and that's why we were told that the Pharisees made noise, and it is true. And so we may want to move to the next point of the fig tree at this juncture, and probably the controversy around the fig tree, and this is probably before or after the cleansing of the temple, or before the entry. Now, when Jesus is approaching Jerusalem, we are told that he cast a fig tree. And so this was one thing that again is very controversial, because Jesus is not known for cursing. He's known for blessing and healing, and he was pro-life. He was not anti-life. And so it is given, Luke tells us that probably the fig tree was a representation in a narration or in a parable. But then again, there are two illustrations. There is that one of a representation in a narration, but then again there is the second illustration, which comes from a real withered tree. And in this second illustration, it states that there were two trees, one that was withered and another one that was not. And so probably he compared the two as the two worlds, or the two kingdoms. And he was probably looking at the old order that was dying, which was within the framework of the temple, and looking at the blossomed tree or fig tree as the new kingdom that he was raising. And so Luke 23 calls Jesus a golden tree. And so it's something that personally I'm not clear about, and that's why I always ask you, if you have any information, you can go to the comment section of our YouTube channel, and probably let's have a discussion around this. You can also find us on Instagram. They are all Isaac Moirori, and we can try and really look for answers from different scholarly viewpoints. And so have nothing much more on that, but it has been mentioned before, especially in 1 Kings 22 and Jeremiah 19. as a symbolic action, and probably in Jeremiah, it represents also a feeling, a feeling of sadness and remorse or anger. And so I really did not want to labor so much on that point. But like I said, all these, I'm not an expert in this. I'm just volunteering to give the little knowledge that I have, and we can have a more engaging section online, and probably come up with this is one of my manuscripts. It's not in a book, and so just trying to voice it like it were in the African traditions, especially in our university in Timbuktu and other universities. And for me, it is one way of trying to put my work out there and getting comments from people, other than using the traditional Western way of peer review and, of course, using the academia. And so I want to reach there, and I want to wish you all the best in this Holy Week as we continue. We shall meet to in a day on Tuesday. So on Monday I'll not do anything because I'll be having exams, and this week is also an examination week. I want to wish everybody who is sitting the exam all the blessing, and may you remember it's about your identity. So play your identity and don't pretend, and God will bless you. Thank you so much.